What I thought I would spend more of my time talking about is our strategy as a company. You know, I came in as CEO a little over a year ago, almost a year and a half, I guess now, since I started working at DIRECTV, and felt it was time to take a clean sheet look at our strategy. And as part of that, kind of put together a process with our leadership team. We'd been a very successful company, as you see, for 5 years. But in our space, the world's changing pretty fast, and you need to change and adapt if you're going to keep the pace and continue to grow at the, at the rates that we've been growing at. So we took kind of 9 months last year. I guess it always takes 9 months, whether it's to have a baby or to produce a new strategy. But anyway, when I was at Bain, it used to be 3 months for cost, 3 months for customers, 3 months for competitors, and then lo and behold, you had a new strategy. But anyway, we took about 9 months before we shared it with our board. We did a 2-day offsite with our board in late summer to share it with them, and then we shared our strategy with Wall Street. And from a process standpoint, I think in any business, you always start with who are you? What business are you in? And while that might seem obvious to you, in our case, I'm not so sure it's that obvious. For instance, someone said I was in the satellite business. Somebody else said it's the pay TV business. Somebody else said it's content aggregation. But I think defining kind of what the landscape of your business is going to be, where is your focus, is a critical first step for any good strategy. And I think hopefully finding in that focus and in that mission something that is kind of above and beyond making profits, something that folks see as important. So we spent a lot of time talking about our vision and our mission, and you see them here on the slide. But I think from my own standpoint, if you think about it, the role that we play, the number of stories that I hear from customers or from technicians that do installations about the role we play in the lives of our customers, I think has been a key part of motivating our own team that we do actually produce a service that's pretty valuable. I think of us as bringing amazing entertainment experiences, important and relevant information to 19 million households in America and 9 million households in Latin America, whether it's news, sports, and weather, or whether it's the smiles and tears that you get from watching a terrific show or drama. We like to think we enhance our customers' lives each and every day in our own way. We give them over 30,000 unique shows a week with the latest technology that we provide to them, both hassle-free and worry-free. And it is a pretty interesting business model, or mousetrap as I call it. So when I came to DIRECTV, and we spent a fair amount of time as a leadership team talking about our vision and our values, I had a starting point in that we had a vision that said make DIRECTV the best television experience in both the United States and Latin America. That was the vision statement. And we only made 2 changes, but I'm a big believer that sometimes less is more, and sometimes the simplest changes have the most powerful impact. So we changed the word television to the best video experience, recognizing that video on demand, and there's been a proliferation of other content, needs to be as much a part of our landscape as linear television channels. And we also had to recognize something that I kind of knew from Pepsi, selling soft drinks and snacks on the go through convenience stores and otherwise, that this is a pretty busy country, a time-starved country. In fact, maybe the most precious commodity we have is our time. And in that sense, the media world needs to understand that anytime, anywhere is as important in a world where the internet continues to become even more important, where 4G is coming, which is going to enable you to kind of download stuff 10 times faster, where you're going to have iPads and iPhones and Androids and all kinds of devices where you can consume video in new and different ways. So those are the only 2 changes we made, but I think they're pretty powerful and fundamental in the way we look at our vision and our mission. Our mission stayed the same, combining compelling and diverse content, technology, and service to make us the clear choice among consumers. And we did spend a fair amount of time talking about values as a company. We'd had a value statement, and in fact, we decided not to change our values. But the exercise of talking about it and why these 6 values were important to us in our business was a tremendously powerful exercise amongst our leadership team. Leadership, innovation, you can't stop innovating in a business that changes as fast as us. It's the lifeblood of our business. It's the lifeblood of any consumer business. Being decisive and willing to take risks, being agile to adapt to changes. I mean, we truly are the original over-the-top company, by the way, not Netflix. If you go back in the 90s, we came out of Hughes Electronics and literally put the satellites in the air when cable had all their local monopolies and were the disruptive competitor back then. So being agile to adapt and change. Teamwork. No one person can get almost anything done in DIRECTV. We have everything from sophisticated rocket scientists, literally, that are putting satellites in the sky. We have 12 satellites just over the US that we own, to an incredibly talented marketing and sales organization, to a whole field organization of 40,000 blue-collar workers that deliver the service, drive trucks, climb ladders, do installs, answer phone calls in the call centers, and the sophistication of that. So it's an amazingly complex business model that really requires teamwork to make it all come together for the consumer. And of course, integrity. So with that as background, I guess you then go to what I guess they call in strategy class a situation assessment. And I kind of boiled it down here to one slide. But suffice it to say, there's no doubt that the world is changing, and we need to change as well. And it always is good to start with kind of an external scan of costs, customers, and competitors when you're setting a new strategy for your business. And that's what we did. We committed to being an even better service. It wasn't that we hadn't been a great service, but the fact was I think we can change and be even better. And in doing that, there were a number of kind of, I'd call it key findings of things that our strategy needed to take into consideration. I've listed 3 of them here. If I had a 4th one, it would be rising programming costs. We can talk about that separately. But these were the 3 mega trends that we need to think about what they meant for our business and for our strategy. The first is higher performance expectations. And I say that on a number of perspectives. First and foremost, the competitiveness that we're up against. So just in the last number of years for mature business, you got 2 big competitors, Verizon and AT&T, entering the video space. Verizon with Fios, AT&T with UVerse. So you get these guys coming in to the space, and frankly, telcos have a little bit different mindset about things in terms of profits and whatever else. I suppose it comes from their heritage, but they kind of disrupted the space. So that was kind of certainly one dimension. I think the other dimension is, frankly, price value. You can't not look at consumers and what we've all been through in the last 3 years and recognize that consumers are under stress. And for our business in particular, it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing in a sense. The average cost for basic pay television services hit $50 in 2010, up 64% from 2000. Now, while my finance guys are real happy, and our stockholders have been pretty happy with that, and our programming partners are delighted with that, the fact of the matter is, for the average consumer, that pay TV bill is a big issue, particularly when you look at what's been happening in the economy. Unfortunately, that challenge doesn't go away because programming costs are projected to grow almost double digits over the next 3 years as well. And we're trying to navigate our space, recognizing we can't raise our prices 10%, but our programmers are raising their prices 10%. So how you kind of manage that is certainly one of the challenges. And I think the other thing is on customer service. You know, if you go back to the 90s when we came on the scene, we really made a big mark on being far better at customer service than the cable companies. And in fact, even to this day, on all of the external surveys that are done, we continue to rank better than the cable companies. But I tried to remind our team when we kind of did a look at our service that that's great, but the fact of the matter is we're kind of the best of a bad neighborhood. If you look at pay television services, in general, they rank, I think, next to last across 13 industries in terms of the customer experience. What are you going to do to get better? The second thing is we did a lot of thinking about the rise of the internet, the connected home, the fact that we're competing with bundles. So what do I mean by all of that? Well, if you look at increasingly in America, almost 50% of households have bundled video services. So they have their voice, their data, and their pay television all under one service provider. And one of the unique strategic challenges is that, believe it or not, the data service that you get in the home, broadband for your internet, the profit margins are something on the order of 90%. Now, the problem with that is it's a little bit tempting then to kind of leverage some of those abnormally high margins and discount the video service. And we're a pure play video player. So that puts some unique strategic challenges for us. So bundles are here to stay. We've got to continue to think of ways of either synthetically bundling services, which we do. So we'll put a customer with AT&T or Verizon if they want DSL. We've got to think about where does that go down the road, because DSL isn't the best technology for bundling, and how are we going to continue to compete? In addition to that, the other big dimension is that when you look at consumer behavior, you've got an explosion in video on demand content and the consumption of video on demand. And for us to be able to do that, you can't just do it through the satellite. I've got specific constraints. Satellite's good for certain things, not for other things. So what do you do to accommodate the fact that you've got to be competitive with the Netflixes of the world, or even with Comcast service Xfinity that has an explosion of video on demand content? We can't do that through the satellite. How do you go about doing it? All of that led to a conclusion that strategically it was critical for us to connect the television to the internet in the home, which then all of a sudden exploded our ability to offer more movies. So we went from 20 movies pay-per-view to 400 to, if we connect the box, 6,000. All of a sudden we can compete with Netflix or anybody else in terms of what we have to offer on video on demand. And also, you got to think about where the world is going, because you got new competitors like Netflix, iTunes, Amazon, Redbox, mostly offering cheaper a la carte options for consumers with dated content. But nevertheless, the landscape of competition has changed, and we need to think about that. And finally, I don't need to tell you all, we live in an increasingly mobile world. By 2013, smartphones will surpass PCs in number. 95 million Americans now have a smartphone. Apple sold 15 million iPads last year alone. 60% of Americans have accessed the internet on their phones, and they're also watching video on those devices. And if you think about the rise of 4G, which Verizon has launched, the 4G technology, newer 4G devices will operate 10 times faster. So instead of 4 hours to download a movie, it might be 4 minutes. All of that's going to have implications for us as we think about our business in an increasingly mobile world where you've got a convergence of technologies. You need to think about anytime, anywhere in a different sense. So that's kind of on one page what I call a summary of our situation assessment. And this is our strategy on one page. And like any good strategy, it's kind of what I call a house chart that starts with a strong foundation. The foundation for us, I think, is our people and our values. And I think we spent a lot of time talking about that when we rolled out our strategy and communicated it across the organization. And the roof of it is kind of what we aspire to be, which is our vision statement of making DIRECTV the best video experience in the world anytime and anywhere you want it. And there were kind of 4 pillars to the house chart. Again, this is our U.S. strategy. I'll talk about Latin America in a second. But it started with our core business. We've always been known for having the most high-definition channels, the best sports, and the best sound and picture. If you go into Consumer Reports, you'll see kind of we get best ratings for sound and picture. Those things we got to continue to be best at and invest in, because nothing stands still. This year, we're going to be rolling out later this summer a new high-definition user interface that's faster, that has smart search, it has a recommendation engine, has a whole bunch of the kinds of things that you typically see on Amazon. Because as we explode the amount of content we offer, you got to have a navigation tool for the consumer to navigate it. In terms of differentiated content, we picked up the damages program for the 101 channel. In terms of the customer experience, as I said, this is an area I think we do pretty well on. But one of the challenges in our business is people have no idea. We take 10 million phone calls a month. 10 million a month. That's a lot of opportunities to not get it perfect, okay? We have over 10 million truck rolls, or kind of service calls, to either install or service or upgrade a year. That's a lot of individual transactions, if you will. And in both cases, in the case of the 10 million truck rolls, it's blue-collar workers making $40,000 a year that have a significant turnover. In the case of 37 call centers, I think we have, we've got probably between our insourced and outsourced call centers that are all exclusive. You've got mostly kind of more rural areas. You're paying $10, $12 an hour, and you have high turnover in those jobs as well. So you have to leverage technology if you're going to try and provide flawless customer service. And we frankly found two areas that we thought we could work on. One is to get a perfect first 90-day experience that we're working on, and the second is a better capability to fix and recover, since you're not going to get it perfect every time. What happens when the customer gets upset? What happens when we make a mistake? How do you deal with it better and more effectively? And we've got to get better at bundles. And in terms of bundles, we went back and negotiated with both AT&T and Verizon the rights to sell fiber bundles, higher speed, because we knew DSL isn't going to be good enough. So we got those rights. We're also working on enabling our own sales force to provide a more seamless experience for the customer by selling and servicing the bundle ourselves. We'll be rolling that out later this year. But I don't think we're done on that subject by a long shot. We got more thinking to do on bundles. In terms of the kind of anytime, anywhere front, it really breaks down into two parts: the connected home and kind of what are you doing outside the home. In the connected home, we launched, as I said, that whole home DVR service last year. It's off to a terrific start. We've set a goal of connecting the boxes of 2 million of our customers. You might say, gee, that seems kind of small if you got 19 million households, except that out of the 19 million households, you need an HD DVR. Only about 10 million have that. And basically, the big challenge here is getting someone to pay for the plumbing and wiring, because every time you send a truck to the home, it's $175. So you'd be talking about $1 billion price tag or thereabouts if we just said, fine, we'll do it for free and we'll roll it out all at once. So we're kind of trying to take a prudent approach. If we're signing up new customers, we're more aggressive because we're already sending a truck anyway, so it's much less expensive. But connecting 2 million homes this year, and we're looking to connect, I think, 8 million over the next 3 years, and at the same time expanding our on-demand offerings in terms of content choices. We launched last year NFL Sunday Ticket to Go, where you could stream the NFL Sunday games on your iPad. We just announced the launch of HBO Go just this week. We've got a new product that we'll be launching later on this year. We're calling it Nomad, and that product enables you to download your DVR content onto a device and then take it with you wherever you're going, on a plane, train, boat, automobile, whatever it might be. And I think there'll be even more in that whole arena of streaming content that you'll see continue to rise in the years ahead. In terms of new revenue streams, frankly, this one was one that was kind of a bit of, you might call, low-hanging fruit. We did a bunch of benchmarking in our strategy, comparing our sales of video on demand to cable and our sales of advertising revenues to cable, and we found we were kind of maybe half or less of what they were selling. It's a big growth opportunity for us. We think it's a $1 billion revenue opportunity in movies in particular and in advertising. The issue in both cases was historically the satellite technology was constrained. In the case of movies, we only had 20 offers, 20 pay-per-view choices. That's not enough in today's world. Now we can do 400, and if we connect the box, it's 6,000. All of that will enable us to have a much more robust movie offering. We just relaunched DIRECTV Cinema in December. We had our best movie month ever, and we got more to come on the whole front of movies this year. In terms of advertising, we do a great job on national advertising, but again, because it was a national satellite service, we didn't do local ads. And so that's the reason that we lagged the cable companies, is we didn't have the capability to do local ads. Well, we kind of, engineers got together, figure out a new way. We'll launch 50 channels in 50 cities this year where we can do local ads. That's a big opportunity for us as well. And commercial, sports bars, hotels, even doctors' offices is an underpenetrated opportunity for us as well. The key thing for that, apart from it's a nice $1 billion opportunity to go at, is it's incredibly important for us to find ways to grow our revenue per customer, if you will, which that does without having to raise prices. So remember the point about programming costs. How do I deal with programming costs that are rising 8 to 10% when I can only raise prices 2 or 3%? I got to find new revenue sources to try and fill in the gap. And that's why strategically that's so important. And lastly, productivity. Programming cost is a big challenge. DIRECTV pays the programming providers, so the NBCs, the Disneys, the CBS, the ESPN, the NFL, et cetera, the Fox, you name it, all of them, $8.7 billion a year. That's a lot of money. And unfortunately for us, it's rising at almost $1 billion a year. So when that's your single biggest line item in your P&L, in your cost structure, and it's growing at that rate, it's a big challenge. In managing those costs, we spend a lot of time in all of our negotiations talking about digital rights, increasingly so, to try and get more value for the customer if we're going to have to pay more for the content that we're offering. And then you find it's a tough negotiating game. But if you're really going to change enterprise-wide productivity, I think you really got to work on the other two items. We're a service business. And so there aren't easy ways to drive productivity short of technology, whether that is information systems or whether it is technology. You need both to make people more productive. And so we're increasing our investment in both IT and in engineering this year. We've got a few specific initiatives, one called Active Decisioning, which is a new system tool that we're rolling out to our call centers to help the call agents know the ideal offer for a given customer when they call in. Kind of a better sales tool. It gives a better experience for the customer. It also enables better customer service. We're also kind of working on a dynamic scheduling tool that would enable us, when you call in, to schedule your install within 24 hours and also make for a more productive workforce when you've got all of those 15,000 trucks across the country that any downtime costs you money. And third, we came up with the two biggest things in an install for a satellite service are putting the dish on the roof and pointing the dish at the satellite. And you can't be off by even a quarter of an inch. A quarter of an inch when you go all the way up 5 miles, it's hundreds and hundreds of miles off. So getting that pointing right, we came up with a new handheld tool called an aim meter that enables you to point it right. The other big cost is wiring. And I kind of said to the engineering group after my undercover boss experience, how come we do all this wiring? Can't we do it wireless? And they gave me all the reasons why they couldn't. And 2 weeks later, we had a demo in the boardroom of streaming wireless DIRECTV from the DIRECTV on the other side of the hall. We're not there yet. It's not ready for commercialization. But I suspect our engineers will figure out something there, and that'll also be a big opportunity. And I think I'll talk about it in a couple minutes, but how do you make your talent more productive, more effective, and more productive? I'm a big believer. We're a people business, and people don't realize to make the DIRECTV system go, while I think we report 20,000 employees, it's really more like 45 or 50,000 workers across the U.S. Some are employees, some are not. But the fact of the matter is we manage 40 or 50,000, and it is a very labor-intensive business model. And so investing in employees' engagement and in their talent capability is really critical for us. So that's the U.S. strategy in a nutshell. If I kind of, let's see, we have Latin America. Do we have one more slide? I think. That's the video. Okay. Just a word on Latin America then before I go to the video. Our Latin America business is just booming. The interesting thing about Latin America is, when I got there, it was I was told maybe I should spin it off. It wasn't, it had been bankrupt about 4 years ago, and while it was doing okay, maybe it wasn't part of the core business. I looked at it and said, I don't think so. I actually think it's our best growth opportunity. And in fact, if you think about Latin America, there's 500 million consumers, which is almost twice what we have in the United States to go after. The business is growing. The macros have been favorable, particularly in Brazil. After kind of a whole fresh look at our international strategy, we set a goal of doubling our revenue and tripling our subscribers over the next 3 years. The key thing in Latin America is we're taking all of the U.S. stuff, all of those capabilities where they make sense. But the challenge in these emerging markets is you have to make it affordable. So in the case of Latin America, we'd always had a nice little business kind of going at the very tippity top of the pyramid. The most wealthy consumers could afford, down there we're called Sky, could afford Sky TV. We did a great job on branding, great job on customer service, a lot of the kind of same things that made us successful in the US. But we weren't penetrating down to the middle of the pyramid, which is where the volume is. So we came up with a number of different strategies. So in one case, we reduced the number of channels. I think it's called Skylight and SkyFit. Sounds like Diet Pepsi. And we've launched that at a reduced price. It's taking off like crazy. Our business expanded. As I said, last year we added 2.5 million new net subscribers across Latin America. We never did that even in the heydays in the US. We also came up with an idea where you could install yourself. So in Venezuela, you can go to the local Walmart, buy the dish and the receiver, and you get a card. You charge up the card, just like a gift card, and you go home, and usually in those countries you can find somebody who's hanging around on a weekend and will kind of, for a fairly modest amount, put the dish up, wire you up, and then your card is as good until it needs to be recharged. So that's our, our prepaid business, and that too is another way of getting down into the pyramid and making the service more affordable. So we've tailored the service in Latin America. There are a number of other differences that have made us successful down there. We're the only national footprint. The other conclusion I came to is, when you think about competitive advantage, the satellite technology is hugely advantaged in Latin America relative to cable or fiber optics or whatever. I don't think anytime soon we're going to be laying fiber optics across Rio de Janeiro or Sao Paulo or Mexico City. So you've got to realize it's strategically, structurally advantaged. We've got the only kind of regional continental footprint. We've got scale. We've got a terrific local team. And our business there is absolutely flying. So with that kind of on the business, let me close with three other kind of topics that I just went on one slide on each one. Judy asked me to just maybe talk a little bit about what was this Undercover Boss experience about. I'll talk a little bit about that, then I'll talk about talent development, and I'll close with some career advice. So I thought I would bring a little clip from the television show, a CBS show, Undercover Boss, if you haven't seen it. The boss goes undercover, and, well, you'll see.
DIRECTV is the largest satellite television service in the United States and Latin America, broadcasting more than 2,300 channels. And at the head of this $23 billion company is one man, Mike White, President and CEO of DIRECTV, is a boss undercover.
I'm most excited about getting to meet people on a one-to-one basis where I can get a sense of who they are and what makes them tick and what we might do that ticks them off.
This is the KAKU swim, right?
No.
No? Where is the KAKU swim LNB again?
Nope.
No.
I'm sorry about that.
You got some fast learners and you have some that ain't gonna never catch on.
Good morning, Tom Peters.
So you're my new trainee for today?
Yes, sir.
Always be positive and confident. Even if you don't know what you're doing, talk like you know what you're doing.
You got a GPS?
You got a GPS. It's good to have them in your truck.
So the company provides that?
No, this is one that you'll have to buy yourself because they're not going to supply GPS.
Okay. At a minimum, we should be providing each installer a GPS system for their truck. I don't know how you'd find your way around all these homes without a GPS system.
Right here, Tommy. Got to get her some TV today. Oh!
It's important that you're accurate, right?
No.
No?
Remember Green Dot?
Oh, the green dot. Yeah.
Tom, for some reason, he couldn't grasp the difference of the swim LMBs and the standard LMBs. He just kept grabbing the wrong one.
Yeah. If you're short of a certain item and the techs hear about it, and then they have to start calling each other, and it's chaos.
If everybody worked together and understood what everybody else's job entails,
Yeah.
then you wouldn't run into problems like that.
Something to kind of look into. It's critical that the installation is done right the first time.
We both can't fit on the ladder.
I think I got it. It's not set up for a left-hander.
It ain't gonna let me activate.
The tech is, in many ways, our most important asset, and we shouldn't have them waiting, much less waiting in front of the customer for someone to answer the phone that long. Yeah, thank you for calling DIRECTV. My name is Tom.
Right.
How are you today, sir?
It's not a sir.
Try one more.
Thank you so much for your help.
You have a great day.
You too.
Thank you, sir.
Look how good you did.
Hey, we did all right, huh? These are tough jobs, these call center jobs. I'm really excited to bring the employees I worked with in here to Los Angeles. You recognize me?
Tom.
I'm actually Mike White, and I'm CEO of DIRECTV.
Oh, my God.
We formed a women's leadership exchange. I think you can bring a new and different perspective to that group. I'm writing you a check personally for $5,000 to support your ministry to helping kids in need.
Thank you, sir.
And I want to create a DIRECTV scholarship program towards your schooling next year.
I'm so excited and overwhelmed.
Okay. I certainly came away with a much better appreciation for how hard our frontline jobs are. Thank you, because you taught me something that even at 58 years of age, I still hadn't fully mastered. At the end of the day, it's about cherishing our employees because they're so vitally important to our success. It's a sobering reminder of kind of how many people make this company go, and it's awe-inspiring. That's what this week's been all about.
Anyway, it was a lot of fun. I was 9 days. Thanks. It was a risk. Being new to the company, I thought, gosh, how do you really see how things work? You know, at PepsiCo and Frito-Lay, I rode routes. I worked in plants. I was in consumers' homes, and I'd spent 20 years at the company. In DIRECTV's case, I came in from cross-industry, outside the industry, hadn't grown up in the business and thought, what better way to do it? My PR group thought this might be good. I think they had a different agenda than I had, but I thought it was a good opportunity to learn, that I'd kind of get my hands dirty. I probably didn't realize that in the process what I learned was not only some of the things that weren't working the way we thought they were supposed to be working, but more importantly that at the end of the day it is a people business. And it's about connecting one-on-one, whether that person has an MBA or comes from a completely different walk of life. I think part of leadership is connecting with people. Out of that, there are a number of things we're doing differently. We've actually, I think in 2 weeks, Caroline, we have our Field Technician Appreciation Week, which happens to be the birthday of Tequila, who's the tough African-American lady I worked for there, who wanted to fire me. So I told her we were going to celebrate her birthday by making it Field Tech Appreciation Day, which we're doing actually this April. But, you know, I think it reminds you of what it really takes in this economy to make a business go. And while we have all this sexy technology and satellites in the sky and great relationships with the media and lots of fun things to do, like going to the Super Bowl and whatever else, you know what, at the end of the day, they're the ones that make the business go. And you can't forget that if you're leading that group. Out of that, apart from that, you know, I've always come with a passion for developing talent. At PepsiCo, I ran a leadership program every year in the summer that I kind of developed, and it was a week-long program that we ran, kind of a group of us. Five years in a row I ran the program. And when I came to DIRECTV, we didn't have much in the way of leadership development initiatives. And I realized that if you're going to start one of those things, I guess the first thing you got to decide is what's your definition of leadership? What is the standard that you want to set for your organization? And then how do you go about building kind of a whole mindset across the organization and a commitment to talent development? We kind of call it the 70-20-10 formula. 70% is on-the-job training. We're very much an apprenticeship business model in that sense for learning. 20% is kind of the assignmentology, if you will, getting a critical portfolio of experiences across your career to fill in gaps. We just moved a guy who'd been in the U.S. for the last 5 years to Latin America, giving him an international experience. And 10% is stuff like the leadership program that I described at PepsiCo that we now have at DIRECTV. We ran our first one here in California last fall. We've got our second one coming up in May. But if you're going to run a program, you got to decide what the curriculum is. You got to think about what you really want to develop and what you can make teachable. And I've always thought that leadership is kind of simple. It's setting and delivering an agenda, taking others with you, and doing it the right way, if you want it in its simplicity. But Joe Bosch, our head of resources, didn't think that was complicated enough. So we now have kind of this wheel here where they've kind of teased out, though, what do you mean? And it grew out of some experience I had at PepsiCo where it seemed like when you were kind of going from assistant brand manager to brand manager, kind of it was pretty clear what success was and how you were going to get judged. But when it came to a decision about whether I get to be a VP, a senior VP, or CEO for that matter, it's more difficult to know. It's more subtle, the decisions become. And my feeling was, how do you teach it? How do you develop people if you don't figure out a way to kind of make it teachable? And so thinking about setting a strategic direction, which in my mind starts with sound strategic thinking, which is both about perspective as well as about kind of understanding strategy, fostering an innovative culture, focusing on the customer, leading change is kind of the strategic direction stuff. DIRECTV has always been great at delivering the results, I would say. We're an execution machine. I think this whole area of building talent is something we hadn't spent anywhere near enough time and energy on. And that really kind of building a commitment to coaching and a coaching mindset, engaging your people and attracting top talent is now a critical part of our agenda. And then kind of the value set that goes with doing it the right way. So, that's kind of a starting point. Our 360s now support that. So, you get now all of a sudden we're asking 360 questions where your subordinates rate you and your boss rates you. I think it's 52 questions that kind of all work off of this wheel. And when we think about training and development, we're trying to work across how do I build strategy capability, executional capability, and talent building people skills as well. So that's kind of the agenda there. And I'll just close, far be it for me to give you all advice. I went to school a long time ago, and the world has changed an awful lot since then. But if I think back on my own career, which has been a pretty kind of interesting journey, I was a major in Russian and English literature at Boston College. I was an exchange student at the Soviet Union in 1973 for 6 months. I'm come a long way from there. But what I found when I left graduate school, I got a master's in international relations, was that I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and I landed at what today is Accenture. Back then it was Arthur Andersen's consulting division. And they said, don't worry that you don't know anything. We have a massive amount of training programs. We'll train and develop you. And that meant a lot to me, that I was going to get that investment in me and my development. Similarly, I then kind of went from Andersen Consulting to Bain & Company, strategy consulting firm, where they also were great at developing talent. And even PepsiCo, my 20 years there, I think is a pretty good developer of talent. So finding an enterprise that's committed to training and developing you, I think is kind of my first piece of advice. I guess my second piece of advice I've tried to give my kids is the more I look around, the more specialized this economy becomes. It really is a highly specialized economy, and I'm the quintessential generalist, so I'm not here to pitch not having a liberal arts background. But the fact of the matter is, I don't care whether it's sports or whatever it is. I was in the trucks at the Masters, the CBS trucks over the weekend, and you just look at who's got what roles within the technology of that truck that are kind of looking at all the signals coming from the golf course. It's highly specialized. And the fact of the matter is you need to think about industry and function as you think about where you kind of start your career, and find a place that you're going to be, things that you're going to enjoy and that you're going to be good at, that you're going to invest in to build a hip pocket skill, while at the same time never losing your generalist perspective that I think has been such an important part of who I am as a leader. Third, continue to invest in developing your leadership skills, which in my mind it's about strategic thinking and it's about people skills in particular, I would say. I'm a voracious reader of stuff, and I would say you always can learn something new. I don't care how old you are. Having a passion for excellence and lifelong learning. Don Kendall, who was the CEO for PepsiCo back in the 60s and 70s, is 90 years old, went to his birthday the other day. He's still curious. He's still learning even at 90 years of age, and I think it's one of the things that keeps him young. You can never stop learning. Just because you get your MBA doesn't mean you're done with learning. You just move to a different kind of learning. And I think committing to investing in yourself and your learning from a lifelong standpoint is critical. And lastly, build and nurture a network. By the time you need one, it's probably too late. So whether you call it your personal board of directors or whether it's a network of relationships of folks that you can kind of look to for advice and counsel, you know, it's never too soon to start building one. Relationships are critical in business, in my view, and perhaps in anything else in life. So that's my advice.
Thank you, Mr. White, for bringing us your wisdom and your vision. My name is David Nguyen. I'm the president of the High Tech Business Association. We are very honored to have you here with us today. It is now my pleasure to kick off the Q&A session by introducing our dean, Dean Judy Olean.
Thanks, David. Sorry, Dan.
Well, thank you, Mike, and you've probably answered most of my questions. I'm going to be concise, and I'm going to ask to do some quick questions. So let's just start with how you look at your competition. You have other satellite companies, Dish, you have telcos, you have cable companies, and then you have the content providers through the internet, some of whom are sometimes your collaborators, frenemies, if you will. So how do you think of your competition?
All of the above. I mean, you can't, in our business, first of all, it's changing. And some of it, it's interesting, Judy, I think most people think it's driven by technology. I would argue it's more driven by how the content rights evolve and what the content providers decide to do with windows. But you can't not look at the entire landscape. You can't ignore Netflix. You can't ignore Verizon, and they are frenemies. I mean, we have a lot of those in our business. They're a partner and they're a competitor. And, you know, that's something that, you know, at Pepsi, Coke was always the enemy, and it was very simple and very clear. Here it's changing, and I think it'll continue to change as options on the internet evolve too.
Do you see anyone looming larger than the rest? Everyone always mentions Google about anything.
You know, I mean, Apple, Google, Amazon all have money, Microsoft, they all have money. But as I said, I have a feeling in the end it's going to have less to do with technology and more to do with how the content providers manage their rights. I mean, the fact is that collectively, in addition to our $8 billion, there's about $40 billion a year that the traditional pay services pay to the content providers. So if they start kind of going a la carte, then I'm going to say, then fine, I'll go a la carte. I'm happy to go a la carte, but you know, everybody's got to have a level playing field.
How do you compete with free? I mean, some of you have probably seen just the explosion of Hulu in terms of eyeballs.
Well, you know, Hulu doesn't have a commercial business model yet. That's why their CEO is fighting with their board, because they're owned by the media companies and they don't make money. I think if he had his druthers, he'd like to turn it into a mini Netflix and let it go from that standpoint. But, you know, I think, again, we have an incredibly, to be able to service 19 million homes, deal with the phone calls, even just sending out the bills and collecting the money, it's a pretty sophisticated business that I think has a place no matter what you do, whether it's a la carte or not. But, you know, I think I keep going. I guess I have this kind of quote, Judy, that there's an old Tennessee Williams play called Streetcar Named Desire, where I think it's Blanche Dubois says something about I depend on the kindness of strangers, and I say that to our programming providers, that, you know, look, if they decide to go a la carte, you know, then I think what you'd have is all of the $40 billion would then, all of the distributors would say, then fine, we want to go a la carte. So there is a disciplining mechanism. Money has a way of doing that, and there's an awful lot of money at stake to finding a way. And I think you're seeing increasingly a consistent approach from Bob Iger to Les Moonves about using Windows and saying, okay, if it's current stuff, you know, Apple isn't going to get Monday Night Football, especially sports, that's live. If it's a year-old stuff or 2 years old stuff, it's going to be all over the place and it'll be a lot cheaper.
And you believe that discipline will hold across the board?
Well, I think you always worry about somebody doing something stupid for the industry that destroys the ecosystem. But as I said, the fact of the matter is you've got $40 billion at stake that is your ultimate leverage from the incumbents, if you will, in terms of current content. In this business, you can never say never. I think we have a pretty good 3-year strategy. What's the world going to be in 10 years? I have no idea.
So, speaking of Netflix, Dish just acquired Netflix.
Yeah, Blockbuster.
I'm sorry, Blockbuster. Yeah. And there are a variety of other forms of acquisitions occurring in the business. Comcast with content provider NBC, and then the telcos merging. How do you see your needs in terms of rounding out your portfolio?
You know, I'm a big believer when I think of acquisitions, and we did spend some time at it last year, that, you know, first and foremost, it has to make strategic sense. That you have to be able to leverage it to get something done you couldn't otherwise do. And second, you know, you have to be able to create shareholder value, which means if you're going to pay 30, 40, 50% more than what the market says it's worth, there's got to be enough synergies, tangible synergies, not foo-foo synergies, to pay for it. So, I mean, I could sit here and say, I would love to own Netflix, but at 150 times PE, I got no chance of creating shareholder value by doing that. So you have to kind of run through that lens that way. As we looked at our business, I would love to find a way to solve the bundle issue, you know, through acquisitions, but it's not so clear yet when or how you would do that in the U.S. We did a look at international. International is a whole different space from a regulatory standpoint in particular, and even a pay versus free TV. There are a number of challenges there. So, you know, we looked at what Comcast had done in buying NBC, but that again, frankly, by the time they got done with the Federal Communications Commission, most of whatever synergies they thought they were going to get, they're not going to be able to get. But the fact of the matter is that Brian Roberts bought it at a good time, at a good price. And he's got a very talented executive in Steve Burke, and I'm sure they'll do fine with it. But I don't think that's our core competence. I mean, if I think about our leadership team at DIRECTV and say, could I see us running Disney? No, candidly. And I think that's part of it, too, is you've got to be really honest and objective with yourself about what your skill set is and what it's not.
But you've also talked about the fact that you really need content, and you're paying close to $9 billion a year in content. Yeah. What kind of bargaining leverage do you have over the content providers?
Well, we have 19 million households, so that's something, but it's not everything. And you know, I think the thing that as an industry we're still trying to think through. I'd like to argue that what we've both done is use bundles in a way that maybe isn't as consumer friendly as one might say. I mean, a network is a bundle. It's a bundle of shows. A channel is a bundle. It's a bundle of shows. We have a bundle of channels that we offer a consumer, 200 channels. Now, the fact of the matter is, in Japan, you saw unbundling and a la carte, and you end up with less content. So I'm not sure it's in the ecosystem's interest to have a la carte, because the variety gets subsidized when you can kind of throw in 200 channels. But the fact is that at the end of the day, I personally believe the only real ultimate leverage is you've got to get the consumer realizing that it's not DIRECTV or Comcast or Time Warner Cable that they need to kind of get mad at. It's the programming providers that are raising prices at an unsustainable rate. Because otherwise, if you beggar your distributor, and trust me, having been in the Pepsi business, I saw this movie. You know, eventually the distributors all, I mean, it's in Pepsi, there was a price war with Pepsi and Coke for years and years. Once the bottlers became independent, they just started raising prices. And then the volume went down, and then the franchise company was hurt. So we're all in this together. It seems to me, I understand there are some anomalies around broadcast versus cable channels that are being addressed in this retrans kind of change. But it's ultimately, I think it's going to have to come back to the consumer. We got to find a better way to make it more transparent to the consumer what's happening with those costs.
So 2 more quick questions, so please prepare yours with, at the microphone. You are now perhaps a game changer in the movie business with the negotiation on shortening the release time to 8 weeks. What do you think that's going to do to movie distribution models and also to the exhibitors?
Well, I don't think, I mean, personally, if I want to see Avatar, I'm going to the theater. Okay, so, I mean, I still think there's a social experience that you get when you go to the theater. So I think
But there are a lot of movies we watch in theaters that are not advertised.
Absolutely. And I think what you will see is that from a convenience standpoint, if you think of the marketing, you know, for the average movie, it's $60, $70 million they're spending on marketing. And marketing is a top-of-mind thing. And 95% of the sales are in, actually, I think 4 weeks, not even 8 weeks. We're kind of in discussions with a number of the movie studios about an 8-week window, but it's going to be priced, Judy, at probably $30. So personally, I don't think there's going to be a huge take on it, but you know, we think, again, it's part of our movie strategy is trying some different things. Originally, I thought we might get it at $19.99. Then I thought it would have been a bigger idea. At $29.99, I'm not so sure. But I don't think it's going to, I mean, remember, too, the bigger issue for them is actually the decline in DVD sales. So really, it's less about, I think it's less about the theaters. I think it's much more around the fact that their DVD sales are going like this, and you're seeing a substitution of rent versus buy, you know, renting a movie in your home rather than buy. So you know, we're going to try it. I don't think, I'm not, you know, we'll see how big it is, but we haven't even finished our negotiations with the studios yet, so we're hopeful.
And one last question on international, because when you think, certainly a satellite is ubiquitous, it's a technology that's exportable, but when you think about content, it's inherently local, and negotiations are inherently local. So what's your critical advantage in going global, and how do you pick locations?
Well, you know, first of all, our focus right now, as you saw, is the U.S. and Latin America. And Latin America, it turns out, as we looked globally, we said, well, we were even luckier to have Latin America because, number one, you got 2 languages, Portuguese and Spanish. We're not in French Suriname. And you got tremendous leverage from that. If you go to Hungary, it's Hungarian, and it's a tiny number of people. So the scale leverage is in Latin America. Furthermore, we mostly control our destiny down there. We own 100% of the business. We're not even in Canada because the Canadian government doesn't want American companies telling Canadians what to do with anything to do with the media business. So you have regulatory challenges in most countries, China, Russia. You have also a lot of countries that don't, to your point, they don't have the content, they don't have 200 channels to offer, and they don't have consumers willing to pay $80 a month for that content. So I mean, there's a side of me that says the U.S. is kind of unique. And so as we looked around, you know, we'll keep an eye out on China, India, Russia, but Gazprom has a satellite business in Russia. I know Russia pretty well. I don't want to compete with Gazprom. Right. India, you've got $4 revenue per month per subscriber, and nobody makes money.
And a bazillion languages.
And a lot of languages, and content is, you're right, it's very local. And not only the content is local, our business is local. You've got to have trucks that can find the home and to find an address, and then you've got to be able to send them a bill and collect. A lot of emerging markets, you can't even find the address. So I would say, you know, we kind of went through a whole scan of international last year and came out of it and said, gosh, we're really lucky with what we got in Latin America. Let's double down there. We'll keep opportunistic elsewhere. But I don't think it's a global business. And even the satellites in the sky, there's specific slots for the U.S. that are different than the slots for Latin America.
Okay, questions? Hustle, hustle. You've got to go to the microphone.
I was signed up with Net, actually, not Sky. But my experience over there has been every time that they would hook up the cable at your house, the guy would always ask, so for $100 more, I'll give you these channels. And of course, that money was pocketed, and of course, it's illegal. So I was just wondering, what does Sky do in Brazil and Latin America in general to combat this sort of behavior that's obviously detrimental to the business?
You know, piracy, it's an even bigger problem in Colombia. Colombia is probably the worst right now because you not only have that, you also have, they don't report the number of subscribers, and then they don't pay to the programmers, and we've got all kinds of ethics and rules as an American company that we abide by. So we try and work with the industry association. We work with government. We work with the tax authorities to get them to kind of go after and keep them honest. I think it's better than it used to be in most of Latin America. I would say Brazil's better than it used to be. Colombia is still a big challenge in terms of piracy, and I think, you know, it's an ongoing, I mean, you can never stop. Somebody's always trying to steal your signal. you've always got, you've got to kind of keep working every day. We use a very, sophisticated security service in our boxes to try and protect the signal and the integrity of the signal. But there's no one answer. You try and get government to step in. You work with the programmers in particular to discipline the other providers, and then you do your own work on signal integrity. We have a whole group on signal integrity. It's called the Signal Integrity Group that goes after fraud cases.
Thank you. Next question.
Hi, my name's Andrew. I have a question about Netflix. If you look back at the internet early years in 2000, companies like JDSU were trading at 2,000 times forward earnings. So is it that outrageous, and where do you see them in 5 years? And if they were going to buy a company in the cable space, who would they buy?
I don't think Reed has any interest in buying anybody in the cable space. He runs a very unique company. In fact, it's, go on their website and look at his value statement. It's a terrific example of building a unique culture that works really well. I admire Reed Hastings and what he's built with Netflix. But, when you say nothing is ever, everybody has strengths and weaknesses. I kind of describe Netflix as a wonderful $8 ice cream sundae for dessert. But it's not meat and potatoes, and it's not the entire meal. And it's probably not going to be. If anything, I think their content costs are getting higher and higher because the programmers have realized they've got to be more careful about windows and how they're going to play this game, or you end up undermining your own system. So, all of the distributors are working on anytime, anywhere, and saying, okay, we can do that too. They do a pretty good job with their user interface, but there's nothing all that proprietary in terms of the kinds of tools. Our new HD user interface will do a lot of the same things, recommendation engines and all that stuff. And most of their content is not what I call hot stuff. So in my mind, there's two different businesses. There's hot stuff, which is not just 8 weeks, but let's say, movies that are reasonably current, and then there's library content. It's kind of like today's newspaper versus going to the library to take out a book. They do a masterful job with the library. Now, there's a lot of kind of attempts to move both ways. They're trying to nibble away at the current stuff and get some of the newspaper ads while still being great at the library business. We're trying to do a little more in the library space while being good at the current event stuff. But I think if you look at Netflix, they've got lots of opportunities internationally. I think that's probably where Reed is focusing more of his time, and he's now having to kind of do some things. They had Stars they signed up a number of years ago for $25 million, which there's no way they're getting, their deal is up the end of this year, and there's no way they're going to get another one of those kind of free throws. The content guys are going to make them pay.
So one last question in deference to everyone's classes. Okay, I'll let you do it, and then let's do two very quick ones. I'll do the last.
I'm curious how an NFL lockout would impact your business and what we'd be doing to prepare for that.
Yep. The NFL lockout, first of all, I don't know anything much more than you all. I did talk to Goodell a couple of weeks ago. My sense is they're pretty far apart. The economics are broken. I think the only team that's public is the Green Bay Packers. Revenues are growing 5, labor costs are growing 11. I don't think there are too many businesses that you get an A on your finance paper for that kind of a business model. So something's going to have to change. And the owners are pretty convinced they got to change it. And most people would say the owners have the leverage unless the courts change the game. Now, that's all in the courts right now. We'll see where that comes out. It's not so clear to me. For us at DIRECTV, if it ends up being a partial season, it's just a pro rata, it doesn't really make that much difference to us. If the entire season is lost, then we have a contract with the NFL. We have to pay them some money, but we get another year on the back end of the contract, and some of it gets made up. Actually, our P&L is better because we lose money on the NFL, but our cash flow is worse. So it's a bit of a mixed bag, but I don't think, look, there's too much money at stake. There's $9 billion at stake for both sides to find some common ground. My guess is they'll eventually do that, although it might be in September before the pressure gets enough that they have to do that. So.
Last question. As a satellite company, I take it you assume the internet is unavoidable as an integrated part of your business model. How do you see yourself 3 years from now?
Well, I mean, there's no question we can't ignore the internet. It's become too much a part of society. So in everything we're doing, for instance, we just launched an iPad app. We've got a Facebook and Twitter sharing thing where you depending on if you sync it up, what's launching it, what's on, and if you got a Food Network show, you can download a menu, a recipe, whatever. You're going to see more and more of the social aspect of this kind of complementary experience, I think. For us, the big question, Judy, is so do you go, I mean, FiOS spent $23 billion to put fiber optics into a third of the US, maybe not even a third. And they probably aren't getting a return on capital out of that. So, I continue to look at ideas, but I still haven't found one to kind of say, let's go kind of do a FiOS thing and we'll dig up the ground and throw down $23 billion in capital on a hope that we'll get a return. So our strategy has been more partner. We're partnered with all the telcos. I've even said I'm willing to partner with some cable guys. So far I haven't got a taker yet, but I suspect at some point we are going to get a taker there. But we've got to, it's the anytime, anywhere, and it's video, not television. We have to make sure that our mindset broadens to include the internet in all that we're doing.
Thank you so much, Mike.
Thank you, guys.